Hello and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host Kiriko, and today we will be speaking to Dutch director Kevin Boitelle about his debut feature film Trip-Tych. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you about our next Celebrating Cinema Film Club screening on October 23rd. We'll be showcasting Night of Cups by Terrence Malick with an intro from YouTuber and film essayist like Stories of Old.
Great movie, by the way. I loved it. People hated it, but I loved it.
Oh my god, I'm not a Malick fan, but
No, this one was so absolutely insane and nonsensical that I loved it.
okay, well, you hear it from Kevin yourself. Grab your tickets right now via the link in the show notes. Today we're talking about a film which I would say is very different from Terrence Malick. Thankfully so.
There's a Terrence Malick reference in it, actually.
Really?
Yeah, at one point in the first part, she says, this is like a AT5 version of the Tree of Life. That's Malick, right? Tree of Life?
Right,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
it is. Oh my god. But that's such a diss, actually.
In a way, yeah.
Anyway, Trip-Tych is a satirical comedy about the Dutch film and theater industry. A film with a very clear beginning, middle, and end that in some way have nothing but also everything to do with each other.
Hanne Hoekstra, leuk dat je er bent.
Ja,
welkom.
dankjewel. Hoi.
We kennen je natuurlijk allemaal als actrice en
Ja.
nu ben je gaan regisseren. Waarom eigenlijk?
Ja, ik denk op zich dat heeft wel altijd wel in me gezeten. Ik ben best wel een storyteller van nature.
Kippenvel op mijn lul gewoon.
Op je lul.
Ik ben gewoon helemaal klaar met begin, midden, eindstructuur.
The film switches in between styles with horror, comedy, realism, avant-garde with wild animations in between. I'm excited to talk with Kevin about his style of working, his views on the Dutch cinema industry, and also his cinematic inspirations. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's now, I would say, 2 weeks ago, more or less, that I saw your film.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been recommending it to everyone. I didn't know
Cool.
how
Thank
or
you.
when it was going to be screened, because I also felt that I saw something that was so specific to my world that I was hoping that I was going to be on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sort of like telling people around me, like, remember that name.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the free promotion.
But now you have a cinematic release.
We do, actually. Yeah, it's crazy.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we always start off with asking our guests what their first memory of film or cinema is.
My very first visit to a cinema was The Little Mermaid
It's very cute.
with my dad. And we were the only ones in the cinema.
Wow.
So the second time I went to the cinema, I was very surprised that there were other people. I thought this is a private experience.
Just for you.
Just
Your
for me.
dad made that
Yeah.
happen for you.
Yeah, and then the second time there were other people, and I was very confused. And that was the very first one. The first one that stuck with me was The Lion King, also in cinema. And slight spoiler alert: Simba's dad dies. And I was crying my eyes out, and I looked to my mom for some consolation, and she was asleep.
Damn. That must have been so lonely, actually.
Yeah, I think that was a formative experience, prepare me for life in a way. But I think the first time something really stuck with me was Star Wars. That I was obsessed with Star Wars as a kid. That was like magic.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because both of your first experiences are very lonely in different ways.
True. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. But no, but Star Wars was a family thing, and that was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Also, while watching Star Wars, you feel that you're part of something, of a family in some way or another, or of another world.
The way I grew up, it was just Hollywood stuff. There was no art house or any intricate movies. It was just Hollywood stuff that really got me into it.
Then from Star Wars, slowly by watching other sci-fi big hits.
Yeah, I started with sci-fi. When I was 12 years old, I wrote for a sci-fi magazine that was actually in stores in Holland. That was hilarious.
That's very sweet.
Started off on message boards, and then it's a funny story actually. I had a little website on which I translated science fiction news to Dutch, and I was on the message board of the magazine. The magazine was actually in stores and stuff. And the guys were like, "Hey, do you want to write for the magazine? Because you already have this website and we need somebody to do the news." So I was like, yeah, cool. But they had no idea I was 12.
Oh my God.
So then they were like, you have to come to a meeting with the editors and stuff. I was like, okay, sure. And I made my dad take me there. And I was this 12-year-old skateboard kid with blue hair, and I just walked in, and they just looked at me like, "Who the fuck are you?" These were the amazing internet times where it was really anonymous. So in walks this 12-year-old with blue hair, and they were probably. I eventually wrote for the magazine for like 2 years or something, but they must have been so surprised when a kid walked in instead of a grown nerd man.
Wow. And then
Yeah.
so you walked in and they let you sit at the table and
My memory is a bit vague, but there must have been a moment where they were like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, what's this?" But they eventually was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, if you're 12, whatever, we can make it work."
that is so sweet.
That was cool.
So then from delving into the world of sci-fi, writing about it as a junior editor, how did it then turn into deciding that you wanted to become a filmmaker yourself?
I started really soon with just sneakily taking my parents' camera, and this was the era of like skateboarding and Jackass and doing graffiti and hip hop stuff. So it started out with just having a camera on me and filming my friends doing stupid shit. Then I went to study journalism for 1 year because I felt like I've been writing for magazines since I was 12. I'm already a journalist. Turns out you have to read papers to become an actual journalist. So I skipped that within a year, and then I was like, I want to go to art school and I want to make films. But the only thing I had was like a VHS tape of my friends puking and doing graffiti and throwing themselves upstairs. So most art schools wouldn't let me in. Thank God I got in Maastricht. I interned at Habbekrats in my 4th year. They did Gebat and Wolf, and they did a lot of music videos back then. I think when I interned at theirs, I was like, oh, okay, you have to pick what you want to do. And then I was like, I want to direct. That's feels like the thing.
This, and I mean this in the biggest compliment possible, that I was delving through your previous work a little bit, and in a lot of the things that you make, there's a sense of, I would say, playfulness, and also a sense of freedom of indeed a young kid picking up a camera with his school friends and just seeing what happens. So it seems as if that feeling, how I would say a lot of filmmakers start out as a teenager with, me, the camera, and the world around me, is something that in some way or another you've been holding on to throughout your career.
Oh, that's a compliment.
Good.
I think maybe it has to do with having fun with it. Is still a big part of it for me. Like I don't want to become a sour old man at whichever point, and I still find it so fun to be with my friends and be making movies. And I'm glad to hear that it sort of resonates through the work. And I think the sense of freedom, I think that's something you have to find back at a certain point. Like when we started out, we did a lot of music videos and all kinds of stuff, and I tried to get into the film academy twice, but they wouldn't have me.
Damn. Well, that's when you know that you're really good.
Well, I remember the first time I got to the point where I had to meet all the people.
Yeah.
And they asked me, like, what do you think of the film academy? And I just saw all these graduation movies, and they were all about my dad has cancer, my mom is dying, and this like heavy drama.
Yeah.
So me as a sort of a snobbish 20-year-old was like, yeah, I don't get why it always has to be this heavy drama. I think that you should first learn film language and blah, blah, blah. And I just saw them looking at me and I was like, I just fucking threw a brick through my own glass house, as they say in Dutch, sort of. So the playful part, I do think it's something that came back. When you start out, there's this, do a lot of music videos, there's this, it needs to be cinematic. It needs to be, every shot has to be thought out. It needs to have a certain level of quality. We have the best lenses, the coolest lights, and there's this thing where you're, which is good because then you learn a lot. But I've noticed in the past few years, this full circle thing is more like it's about ideas, not necessarily about the technical side of it, of how good it looks, or it's more about ideas and stories than it's about the technical side. And I think that brings with it a certain playfulness because with it comes a sense of freedom. Like I can shoot a thing on my phone. I can pick up 3D animation next week if I want to. So I think that's an important sense of freedom for me.
Yeah. But still, I would say, I mean, as you just said, like you've made basically everything before this, like countless commercials and music videos for, you know, every man who raps in this country, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
And short films, and it's still, I would say, even within all those different works, or I'm curious to know how do you find the challenge for yourself in every single project that you take on?
Maybe a big part of it also might be I never clung to a style for myself. I'm never like, this is my style and this is how I do stuff. I try to have a fresh outlook on everything that I do. So there's not which, for example, in commercial world, that's not the best attitude to have. And in the commercial world, it's very much, this is what you can do, this is what you do, this is what you get booked for, these are the jobs you get. But I always found that limiting, I guess. And I had my own production company for 10 years, and our whole thing was we just do all kinds of stuff, and because it's fun. So I think that it has to do with sort of stylistic freedom, where you can approach everything from a semi-fresh start. Of course, you bring what you've made before, you bring your own taste, and you bring your own views on it. But I do like making very wide range of stuff.
And you do a lot of things yourself as well, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Some of it is by necessity. Like I edit almost all my own stuff because I like to. I know what I want, and at the time if I'm with an editor, and the time it takes me to explain what I want, in that time I could have done it myself. A good friend of mine and the editor I worked with from the beginning, he passed away 6 years ago, Boitelle van Lijn. And we had a very good working relationship where we didn't even have to talk. I would just lay down on his couch and look at him, and he would be like, oh, and I'm like, oh, and then he started editing. So when he passed away, it was also it was a hard time personally, of course, but also after that, working with other editors, you bring the expectation of, you know exactly what I want, right? But that's not there anymore. So after that, I started editing a lot of stuff myself. I always did a lot of editing myself as well. So shout out Wouter. We learned from the best.
Shout out Wouter.
Definitely.
Well, maybe from then, all those experiments and fresh outlooks on all the things that you've done, you have now come to a point where you've made your first feature film.
Yeah.
Which I would say is
crazy.
also, it's crazy in one way, but also you've been building up to it for quite some time, no? Like it's
I think so too. When I did the making of for Rabat and for New Kids 2, when I was like 22 or whatever, and then Jim Tayutu and Victor, the guys who did Rabat, they made Rabat before they were 30. So I had this thing in my head, like, I have to make a movie too before I'm 30. That needs to happen. Didn't happen. But I'm actually glad. No, I'm not glad it didn't happen. But if everything that I've learned through these years, I put into this movie. So the movie that 29-year-old me would have made would have been way different than this. So it does feel like an accumulation of things I've learned along the way, and just conceptually being able to take risks, I guess, or just be like, okay, this is what I want to make, and it might not make sense to a lot of people, but this feels right to me, I guess.
I think it's a good thing also. I think especially in the Netherlands, there's a big pressure on this idea of becoming a young and hot happening maker or whatever, which is such an ebb and flow of like constantly new people making like very. I see this with like a lot of people who recently graduate from the film academy, where you make films about what just happened to you, but when you're 22, you know, like 3 things happens to you, maybe.
True, yeah, and those 3 things can be interesting. I mean,
it's like your high school exam, and then something with your parents, and your first girlfriend, and then it's like
yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's a great movie to be found in there.
Hell yeah, for sure. But I think it's good. Nice to mature in some way.
It's good to get some life mileage, and it's also good to get some mileage just shooting stuff, just learning the language and discovering. It sounds a bit pretentious, but discovering your voice, I guess, and what is it you want to say, and it takes time.
Yeah. So what is it that you wanted to say
with this movie?
With Trip-Tych?
I didn't set out with a clear, this is what I want to say thing. For me, it's also about discovering along the way what I want to say or what I'm saying. There was this really good, Cesar did a really good podcast series about the film fonts at one point for the VPRO. And I remember listening to it, and the film funds guy was like, "Yeah, we pride ourselves on not leaving anything to chance." I'm sort of misquoting, probably paraphrasing, but the thing he said was like, "We pride ourselves on the fact that everything we do is fully prepared, and there's nothing that's left up to chance. Before you shoot, you know exactly what you're gonna do and what it's about, and we put all these months into preparation." And I was like, that's not a selling point. That's not necessarily for me as a maker a good thing. Like, I want to have an idea, but it's also, there's only so much you can prepare. Eventually, it's turns into a day where you're somewhere with people and a camera. And for me, it's a lot about also leaving open possibilities for stuff to happen in that situation. There's only, for me, it's only so much you can prepare. Of course, you write a script, you write dialogues to the best of your ability, you gather the right people for it, but there's still a part that needs to be discovered while doing it or while editing it, and I think that's also what keeps it interesting. So there wasn't a clear, oh, this is what I want to tell with this movie from the onset. I think there were some ideas and some things that for me, not necessarily frustrations, but a lot of ideas about storytelling, about structure, about the creative process. I think the creative process mostly was the starting point for me with this movie.
On the creative process of yourself, of how as a filmmaker you create a story.
Yeah, and in general, just how stories function. And this is a bit of a risky thing where it's like, movies about making movies can be tricky and can be a bit self-indulgent and maybe only interest. That's my biggest fear with this movie, that it's only interesting for people that make movies. Or biggest fear that I hope there is enough in it for not movie people to be like, this is interesting. But it also feels in a way like the whole meta level of it feels like something that I need to get out of my system and do something with. And now this was the perfect storm of all the meta stuff building up in me for years, I guess.
Yeah, there's some iconicness in the pretense also, no? Like, making a film about what it's like to make a film is also like the most auteur thing you can do in a nice way. Like you're like after the Godard and the Fellini, it's like get in.
Yeah. That's what I was aiming for. Yeah, get in that top three. No, there's absolutely yes, but there's a very fine line with it being self-indulgent and just about itself too much. But I hope we found a balance.
Maybe for those of the listeners who haven't seen the film yet, you could give a small recap of what the film is about.
Yeah, so it's called Trip-Tych because it consists of 3 parts. The first one is about a voiceover actress in the studio who clashes with her director. Second one is about a theater group that tries to make a surreal version of Kom een vrouw bij de dokter in an anti-squatting place. And the third part, it's hard not to spoil stuff. The third part sort of goes. This is the worst elevator pitch ever.
Thankfully, you don't have to sell it anymore.
No, true. No. It's already been sold, so that's good. Third part is sort of it's where it all comes together and sort of crashes and burns, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, somehow they have nothing to do with each other. They're 3 different worlds, but they all move in between the same circle in some way or another. There seems to be a very clear structure in it, but it also seems to be an exit in some way or another. I guess the whole playfulness that you were describing earlier is also applicable to how this story unfolds itself.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, this is a meta freedom thing I allowed myself to do, where it's 3 parts, and 3 parts are actually called beginning, middle, and end, but they don't function necessarily as a beginning, and middle, and an end. So that gave some freedom. And the first part started off as a short movie. The second part we shot because we had the location for like 2 months, and then we had a 10-minute movie and a 40-minute movie. And then I was like, okay, if I write a third part that sort of ties everything together in a conceptual way, then we have an actual movie. So it sort of accidentally became a film in that way. But maybe maybe accidentally is not the right word. It did feel when I was writing the third part, I was like, okay, now it really is coming together and makes much more sense. So it was an accidental thing, but it was also maybe something that needed to happen for it to make sense to me and to be interesting to me to make it.
Because, so you made the first part as a short film, and then the second part you did because you had a location.
Yeah.
But already in mind that you were making a feature film?
Not necessarily.
That's so sick, actually, that you sort of I don't want to say by accident, made your first feature film, but it's
In a way.
it's nice that those things can happen.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is.
And not to spoil too much, but in the third part of the film, you make fun of, I would say, a lot of institutions in the Netherlands.
Institutions that need to give me money after
Exactly,
this. So
that
that's,
you're actually incredibly like the only people that you're dependent on for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But in a way that I would say everyone could appreciate, and I hope the parties involved as well.
I hope so too.
Yeah, you recreate the film funds, which is the biggest source of subsidy for film in the Netherlands, and Dutch television and Netflix. And did you actually make this film without them also?
Yes, we pretty much paid for everything ourselves. So everybody worked for free. So the cast and crew worked for free, most of them. So we paid it out of pocket.
Damn.
Yeah. Wouldn't recommend that, but
No,
it did
that's
work.
rough. That's so rough.
We did it before with a web series we made. Yeah, it's tough. The toughest thing actually is, we know a lot of people through a long time doing this. So finding people like camera people or gaffers or actors is not that hard, but getting them together on the same day. The agenda was the trickiest thing. Like agents would go insane if with our planning shifting all the time. But so nobody gave us money. We didn't try. I have to be honest. It wasn't as if we were shopping this movie and then get no's everywhere and we're like, okay, we're just gonna make it. We just made this. I've had some experiences with the streaming services and with the film fonts. Not literally are in the movie, but there's a certain sense, and it's also not a. I do want to be clear about it's not a sour critique of it, and it's not hating on it or hating on them personally or whatever. It's just an over-exaggerated, stereotypical view of how these things work. And there are some aspects of it are based on reality, and some are blown out of proportion.
Yeah, and I think it's also an important testament, maybe for this country, that this is the one film that I think could only be made without the help of those institutions. But that in itself, I mean, the fact that you got your cast and crew to work for you for free already means that a lot of people trust you, I guess.
Yeah, that I hope so. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Which is a great compliment.
It's absolutely, yeah.
And putting, I would say, a larger lens on Dutch cinema itself, I feel like the film also, in some way, maybe not critiques, but hints on the idea of this culture that we're a little bit stuck in, maybe, or that the Dutch audience and Dutch makers are also stuck in, that we follow a certain path of, I mean, of course, all cinema follows some form of path of structure and expectation, but I would say Dutch cinema even more so.
I guess, in a way, yeah.
And I think generally a lot of people also have the notion that Dutch cinema is kind of, in Dutch you would say eentonig, which in English I would say bland. And you seem to make a stance of not really being or wanting to be part of that culture. Is it a critique that you have, or is it...
I don't think it's critique. I think one thing I've learned while growing older is like, I think at a certain, when I was younger, I really hated like the Godverdomme Dutch movie thing, and I was just really not in a... I learned to grow that it's not my taste, it's not my thing. I don't have that much opinion of it. It's easier to be like, it's not for me. But you can still make fun of it. Yeah, so I don't know. It's not a critique in a way where it's like, I hate this stuff and burn it to the ground and don't ever make this anymore. But I do feel like there should be some room for other stuff. But it's a bit of a chicken and egg conversation, because I don't know how many people go to the film fonts or to the streamers with amazing ideas that get put down. But the chicken and the egg thing is like, do they not even try because they know they're not going to get it with a more experimental or weird or whatever it might be idea. So it's hard to pinpoint where, if it starts with the actual film fonts and the streamers, or if it starts with people just being like, not even going to try because he only makes Second World War and Verliefd op Punch Puncher movies. So I think also I think some change there should be coming.
I want to go back maybe to where we started our conversation with your childhood love for sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that is still, in some way or another, part of this film as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is sci-fi still a red thread in your source of inspiration in what you make?
I guess so. It turned more into books than movies. Sci-fi things. I read more. I read a lot of sci-fi. I think the sort of sci-fi aspects of sci-fi genre gives a certain freedom to tell stories about. Not that this is a sci-fi movie at all, but it gives a freedom of holding up a mirror in an interesting way and escaping a certain literalism that can get boring. That's what I like about sci-fi.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of smart stuff and good sci-fi that I really, really adore. And I wanted to say I still love Star Wars, but man, that new shit sucks so bad. I stopped watching at a certain point.
Do you have current inspirations, like filmmakers or films that have really spoken to you?
The first time I talked to Hein from Augusto, our distributor, he was like, it reminds me of Quentin Dupieux. And I was like, whoa, thanks, that's amazing, because I love his shit. I mean, he makes like 2 movies a year. That's fucking crazy. Like every time I turn around, there's something new of him playing. And the thing with his movies, what I really like is like they're not all amazing, but they all have ideas, and every movie of his has like 3 scenes that blow my mind. Like the Dali one had one scene that just. So I'd rather see stuff where somebody tries something of his own, and it doesn't necessarily have to work perfectly. But I see ideas and I see somebody taking a risk than playing it safe. But I think the best thing I've seen recently. Let me get my letterbox. My memory is trash. Semi-recently watched Veep for the first time, the series. That was.
I don't know what that is.
That's like it's a political series with Julia Dreyfus from Seinfeld, and I think like dialogue-wise, that's one of the best things ever made. It's absolutely insane. No, but I love Quentin Dupieux, and I just got into Altman actually.
Mm-hmm.
Love that stuff. It's so unpredictable compared to what we're used to watching now. It's just this dialogue-driven, forever ongoing weird camera movements, and I really, really love his stuff.
Nice, neat. Maybe to close things off then, I'm curious to know, and this is a broad question, but you can answer it in the way that you like, what your hopes for the future are. For yourself.
Future of the world in general,
No, I would
world
say
peace.
more,
And
let's talk into cinema,
Okay.
but for yourself or for Dutch cinema or cinema in general?
for myself, big bag of money to make whatever I want to make next.
Bless, I hope so.
Yes, I hope so too. No, I'm also, what's interesting is this movie feels like an accumulation of everything I've learned and everything I find interesting. It also feels a bit like a moment where I've been doing it for 17 years now, and I sort of recently found out the hard way that I've been running my ass off for 17 years. It also feels like a sort of moment for me to chill out for a bit and actually think about what I want to make next. I always have this sort of Dropbox folder with a million ideas in it, and mostly just keep on going and pick one out. But it also feels like a good moment to take a tiny step back and be like, hey, should the next thing be? And for cinema in general, yeah, I would love to see just some more people showing some balls.
Super nice. That would be super nice.
Yeah, I guess that's the long and short of it. Maybe that sounds negative. I want to be surprised. I want to be confused when I watch. Not necessarily confused. I want to be surprised, and I want to see ideas and somebody taking risks. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be weird or meta or surreal or anything. It's just it could be anything. Like I watch all kinds of different stuff that I find intriguing. But I think it starts with ideas and a vision. That sounds very cliche, but it's true.
No, but it's so
It's
true.
Yeah, it's true.
And let Trip-Tych be a testament for everyone, but also the industry. I would say that success is and great film is there where you go outside of the gebaande paden, the paths that have been paved out for you.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it would be nice if the filmfonds see that also for you and your future.
Yes, that would be great.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank
Kevin.
you. Thank you.
I really hope that after this conversation with Kevin, you've learned a little bit more about Trip-Tych and what went into making this stunning film. Of course, there's nothing left but to go and see the film, which is now screening at Lab and other cinemas all over the Netherlands, and also soon on Amazon Prime.
Yes, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. No, we can say I can say it. Whatever. Yeah, it's gonna be on Amazon Prime. I think 3 months after cinematic release. So
Oh my
that's gonna
God.
be the beginning of next year.
But go see it in the cinema first, because that's more fun.
That's
I would
where
say.
a movie belongs.
Exactly.
If you listen to Martin Scorsese.
You can find a link to the tickets in the show notes. If you want to stay up to date with everything we're doing here on Celebrating Cinema and at Lab, you can follow us at Lab111 on both Instagram and now also on Letterboxd. This includes our latest episode together with film critic and writer Basje Boer about female stereotypes that we love, coinciding with a program here showing at Lab 111. If you like what we do here, you can support us by leaving a review on whichever podcast platform. It really does help us, and share it also with your friends. Thank you.